All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Synamon Says, What Do You Say? This evening we have a most interesting guest, Leslie Military, attorney Leslie Military, who's actually has her own practice here in Atlanta. Well,
that's correct.
We say Atlanta Metro.
Metro area.
But here in Jonesboro or Riverdale. Where are you located?
Jonesboro.
In Jonesboro. But before we get to Leslie, I have some announcements I'd like to make. There's Target. Listen to this, you all. Target has a free program where children 12 and under can get free eyeglasses. Has nothing to do with income. Let me say it again. Has nothing to do with income. Anybody that you know, 12 and under, go straight to Target and they'll give you a pair. You can get a pair of glasses up to $200. This is free, okay? So if you don't remember this, well, I shouldn't say if you don't remember it, write it down, because we all know somebody 12 and under who could use some eyeglasses. And the thing about it, this could be that extra pair that they need. And again, it has nothing to do with income. There's also a program out there for adults to get free eyeglasses. And if you will email me, I will get you the information, because I was unable to ascertain exactly the process that you go through, but I do know that there is a way for adults even to get free eyeglasses. So email me and I'll tell you more about that. Tomorrow night, open mic at Silver's Delight Restaurant down in East Point with Andy Lee Productions. Serena Muhammad is hosting that, and she does the third Saturday of each month. Open mic. It's free to those who come to share their poetry, and $5 for those who are just in attendance. And here in Clayton County, on tomorrow at 3 o'clock, 3 to 5, we have what's called youth poetry at the Coffee Spot. And again, you just email me and I'll give you all that information. Young people, summer jobs for youth applications. We do have them available. Again, Synamon Says at helloworld.com. I know I've been saying Synamon Says at AOL.com, but we're switching over to Synamon Says at helloworld.com. So if you'll email me, you're interested in any of this information, I'll be sure to get it to you. Again, young people, there's summer jobs available. There's a lot of money that's been channeled into the state for actually stimulus money that's targeted exactly for summer youth programs. So again, contact me about that. I'd also like to ask all of you, if you would write this down, blackstarproject.org. Please go to blackstarproject.org and read the essay called America Has Lost a Generation of Black Boys. And we'll be talking about that on next week. Now, thank you so much for being here this evening.
You are quite welcome. It's my pleasure.
And the beauty of Leslie being here, everyone, is that she's one of those kind of people you can call on at any time, and she'll be there for you. This evening, I really had hoped that we would be able to talk more about race relations in Clayton County, but we've been confronted with an issue that we think is a lot more important right now, because race relations can only be solved within each race. I can't solve white folks' problems. White folks can't solve my problems. We have to solve our problems within a race. But there's one problem that we have that we can all solve, and that's the problem that has to do with our children and the justice system. I want to talk about, give you a few hard statistics in terms of what's going on in America with our young people and the justice system. Ironically, even as an African-American man holds the highest office in the country, African-Americans remain twice as likely as whites to be unemployed, 3 times more likely to live in poverty, and more than 6 times as likely to be incarcerated. Think about that one. Let me add something else to that. All communities seek a fair and just administration and enforcement of the law. However, racial disparities are well documented throughout the justice system, from arrest to sentencing, particularly for African American men, women, and children. Data also shows that African American children, who are 16% of the youth population, experience a cumulative disadvantage as they permeate the system. nationwide, African American children are, and I'll say it very clearly, 28% of the juvenile arrests, 30% of referrals to juvenile court, 37% of the detained population. It's okay.
Okay.
Well, not what I said wasn't okay. But we got a thing going on here. We're doing this conversation about our set here. Thank you. Okay. 37% of the detained population, 34% of the youth formally processed by the juvenile court, 30% of adjudicated youth, 35% of the youth judicially waived to adult criminal court, 38% of the youth in residential placement, and here's the one that breaks my heart. 58% of youth admitted to state adult prison. That's a lot, isn't it?
That's a lot.
African Americans, who represent 13.4% of the U.S. population, but they are 30.5% of all people arrested and 58.3% of all juvenile arrests for violent crimes in the nation's cities. Things like that make you wonder just how far we have progressed and how far we've actually gone back. The worst part of this is that it's impacting on our children and our grandchildren. The generations after us are the ones who are being most impacted by those numbers that I just cited to you. Let's talk about this, Leslie, okay? Most young black men in the United States don't graduate from high school. Young black male students have the worst grades. Black men in prison in America have become as American as apple pie. There are more black men in prisons and in jails in the United States, about 1.1 million. There are more people in American jails, more black men in American jails than there are in all of the world combined. Let me say that again. There are more black men in prisons and jails in the United States than there are black men incarcerated in the rest of the world combined.
Wow.
This criminalized process now starts in elementary schools with black male children as young as 6 and 7 years old being arrested in staggering numbers. Now that information, you all, is not something Synamon says. It's information that you can get from the Advancement Project's report on education on lockdown by the Advancement Project. The schools that black boys attend prepare them with skills that will make them obsolete before they even graduate. In a strange and perverse way, I always stop when I want to emphasize something, make sure you all are getting this, okay? In a strange and perverse way, the black community itself has started to wage a kind of war against young black men and has become a part of this destructive process. Who are young black women going to marry? Who is going to build and maintain the economies of the black communities? Who is going to anchor strong families in the black community? Who will young black boys emulate as they grow into men? Where is the outrage of the black community as the destruction of its black boys continues? Where are the plans and the supportive actions to change this? Is this the beginning of the end of black people in America? That's a big question. Where do we go with this?
Well, as you were speaking, Synamon, a couple of things came to mind. One of the things that came to mind was that we are over-criminalizing our young people for conduct that was committed, say, in my generation and your generation, where you were not arrested because you had more community policing. If a young boy or young girl walking down the street, police stopped them and asked them their name. Today they're so afraid to give their right name because they don't know, they don't trust. There's a huge mistrust of our law enforcement, unfortunately. The problem is if they give the wrong name today, they're arrested for giving a false name. They may think, well, I'm just going to give a false name because I don't want this officer to know my name because, you know, I'm a good kid. I just don't want my name out there. And the reason I know that, and I'll give you an example. My nephew was at Morrow, in Morrow, at the movie theater. I was supposed to pick him up. And I fell asleep. And it was about 1 o'clock in the morning. I woke up and said, oh my God. He didn't mind because a lot of the kids hang out outside of the movie theater. He was out there waiting with his friends. I decided to call the police officer because I know they patrol the area to tell him not to worry. I described my nephew and I said, please, I'm running late. I fell asleep. He went to the last movie. If you see this young man, this is what he's wearing, this is how he looks, please tell him. Well, the officer found my nephew who was waiting outside of the movie theater, and my nephew was afraid when the officer said, come here, young man, what's your name? The officer obviously wanted to know because, so that he could tell the right person what I had said. My nephew said, I was so scared, never been in trouble in his life. He said, I was about to give him a false name. He said, but I couldn't think fast enough, so I gave him my own name. I'm thinking, thank God you couldn't think fast enough because that was a crime. But I said, well, why would you have given him a wrong name? He says, I don't know. I just didn't know why he wanted to know my name. I just didn't want him to know my name. But, of course, he gave him his name, and that's when the officer told him, well, your auntie's going to pick you up shortly. The point is, when he told me that, it made me think, oh my God, how many other young men and women in your position, young kids, are arrested because they don't understand the criminal justice system. They do something that simple. When I was the Solicitor General years ago, actually, it seems actually, you're right, months ago. The point is, those 4 years, so many cases came through that office for young people, ages 17, 18, for false names, false information. I mean, things like giving the right name, but 1 date or 2 off of your birth date. For some reason, they thought, let me just do. And after talking with my nephew, because of that situation, I understand these aren't criminals, but they are facing a criminal charge. That is a false name charge. That's a misdemeanor. So when you say the numbers are increasing, of course, it's staggering. Also, what I thought about was how certain states will criminalize or increase the penalty for something that should be treated, such as I was looking at the stats about drug offenders. Georgia, for the possession of marijuana and cocaine for a certain amount of, marijuana under an ounce is a misdemeanor. Anything over an ounce is a felony. I practice in another state, Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, marijuana, even up to a couple ounces, it's still a misdemeanor. In Georgia, possession of cocaine is a felony. Even if you're a user, if you possess what we would call, say, 1 hit of cocaine, something only a user may possess, say they put, and that person needs treatment. Well, say a state like Pennsylvania, they treat that as a misdemeanor because they say, you are a user, you need help. Georgia has made that a felony, and it's always been a felony to possess cocaine. So when you look at the disparity from state to state, you can be in one state. If you are, say you're a young man from Pennsylvania, you travel here to get away from your drug problem, you relapse. You don't know it's a felony. You don't have any felonies on your record, and maybe you were placed in a program in Pennsylvania. You come here, you start and you relapse. Someone sells you drugs, you use drugs, but you're a user, you need help. You're charged with a felony here in Georgia.
I'm glad you mentioned, you pointed to the drug issue, because as we look into the system, and we talked about the numbers of those who are incarcerated, those of us who are incarcerated, African American people, are there basically for non-violent crimes, and most of them are for possession, which has been for their own personal use. And instead of locking them up, they should have been, as you say they do in Pennsylvania, been put into been able to get into some form of program or something, but instead they're criminalized. They're criminalized,
and here. Your second possession, say cocaine. I mean, you're going to jail. You're going to have a felony 5 years. You're going to do serious jail time. So here you are, a non-violent felon. You're in jail. When you come out, it is very difficult to get a job.
Okay.
And one example of that, a situation like that, the young man, I think we've all read about in Boston, who I believe killed his sister at a birthday party, her 5-year-old and the other sisters. Let's look at the underlying issue there. The underlying issue is this was a young man who ended up going to jail. When he came out trying to do the right thing, could not find a job, sunk deep into a depression. Because he couldn't get a job because he had the criminal record, and it's a cycle. It's when you come out, if you can't get a job, what happens is a good percentage, and I don't know if you have the numbers, but I think it's almost half of the percentage of the individuals who come out go back. Right. So we have no reentry program. Right. We need more programs when people reenter society. And those are things that, as advocates for keeping our young people safe and helping, we have to start more reentry programs. And who do we put the onus on? We have to put the onus on the government. Instead of building and more prisons and putting more money into prisons, why don't we take that funding and put it into programs to help educate, give job opportunities to those individuals who are coming out of prison? And I believe that there were some statistics.
Let me read this. Let's share this with them. I know research has shown that imprisonment, the most severe sanction along the justice system, is an expensive and ineffective strategy to address nonviolent drug offenders. A number of states have saved resources after developing alternative sentencing options for their population. For example, after California passed the Substance Abuse and Crime Prevention Act of 2000, which diverts people convicted of simple nonviolent drug offenses from incarceration to probation with drug treatment, the state saved over $1.5 billion.
Precisely what I'm saying. You can
$173.3 million in the first year.
Wow.
Over $800 million in 5 years, and over $500 million by avoiding new prison construction.
No, $500 million, and I mean a staggering number of what I believe you said, $1.5 billion was saved.
The state has saved over $1.5 billion.
And that's precisely what I'm saying. You can save money with alternative programs. I've been an advocate of alternative programs. I believe probably the whole time I've been working in the criminal justice system. And I started back in the early 80s in the district attorney's office in Philadelphia. And there was a program they called Alternative Rehabilitation Disposition, where it diverted cases out of the system. And that was back in the 80s. So we have the knowledge. We know that we can save money by continuing to help and educate, rehabilitate, but the prison or penal institution, penal system is big money. And I didn't really want to go there, but I feel like
an industrial complex. Go there.
And it is big money. The prisons, if they closed it down, they could lose hundreds and I'm talking about millions of dollars a year. Communities would literally probably just cave in, and that's why I believe we still have they're still building prisons, because we're taking care of hundreds and thousands of families by building prisons, but we're also killing and destroying hundreds and thousands of families at the same time. And you just have to look at the disparity. Who are we helping, and what race, creed, color, religion are we destroying? There are a number of we have to look at the socio-economic situation that sends the young African Americans and other races to jail. I mean, it is a disparate treatment. There is disparate treatment of these individuals coming into the criminal justice system. And I never thought I would say this, is that there is unfair treatment in as far as representation. I have seen people rush their clients through the system, and I will say this, I actually got a call from someone one day and said, you're taking too long to prosecute cases. The reason the time we were taking to prosecute cases was because we were actually reviewing. We were reviewing the files to see whether this case should actually be prosecuted. And this was the defense attorney. He says, but I get paid faster if that case goes in, and he was a court-appointed attorney, and he know, if he's watching, he knows I'm talking about him. And I just like I have to say, because he said that if the case gets through the system in a month or two, he can now bill the county for that case. What about me spending time looking at that case, making sure it should even be in the system? So when you look at things like that, you wonder why we have more African Americans that can't afford proper legal counsel.
Right.
And they do have a reason to be leery. Now you have good attorneys who are on the court-appointed list, public defenders. I mean, some of the best. But there are those who are there, and they're just looking at the money that they can make if their case is rushed through the system and they can bill. And that's a shame, and it's sad. And the numbers are there, though, to prove it.
Wow. Sometimes when we have these kinds of conversations, I get really overwhelmed, but we know that all is not lost. And I wanted you just briefly, if you would just address a couple of things, because, all right, we know that the system is against us in terms of the sentencing, in terms of imprisonment and all that. We know that. Okay. What we don't know is how do we navigate this situation for our young people. For instance, there is such a thing as expungement, yes, right?
Yes.
And there is such a thing as community service. There are alternatives.
Pre-trial intervention.
Right.
Diversion.
That kind of stuff.
Well, yes, there are alternatives to prosecution, and one of them, pre-trial intervention programs, they typically educate, rehabilitate, and they divert the person out of the criminal justice system, and in some instances, they're eligible for what we would call an expungement, and that is that erases the arrest. Now, even if you get a case dismissed, the arrest is not necessarily erased. You actually have to go through that process of filling out an application, filing that application saying that I want this arrest off of my criminal history. And you do that after your case has been dismissed via pretrial intervention or some other type of diversion program, something that says the system is not prosecuting. That prosecutor has to say, we are not going to prosecute that case, and it makes you eligible for what we call an administrative expungement. And there are other instances where you can apply for what we call judicial expungement. Doesn't mean it's going to be expunged, but if your case was dismissed and it's not representative of what, the arrest is not representative of what really happened, there's a possibility that can be expunged through the legal system.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here this evening, and I know you all have gotten a lot of information, as probably more questions behind the information that you received. So if you'll just email me at synamon@helloworld.com, I'll answer your questions or get them answered by our attorney here. And again, she's in her law office in Jonesboro, and I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your ad. So you guys, I don't know if you can see it this week, but next week you'll be able to see the ads, and I really appreciate you and all that you bring to Clayton County, and we look forward to working with you throughout the year.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Thank
it's
you.
My pleasure.
Okay. Thank you very much. Now, everyone, if you'll just give us a second, I have another guest this evening, because everything that Leslie talked about in terms of the young people, the expungements, how the children get caught up in the system and how they don't trust, all of those things will be addressed tomorrow. We have a seminar entitled Equipping Young Men for... I lost the title. Equipping Young Men for Higher Education and Responsible Living. Okay, I'm sorry, I messed it up. But Wayne is here, and he's going to talk to you all about tomorrow's program. I don't have a lot of questions for you, because what I know is that you guys have worked very hard. You're expecting at least 100 young men and their parents tomorrow evening. Tomorrow morning. And you can just tell us about that.
Well, it's going to be a good event. Again, we're hoping for about 100 young people including parents, fathers and mothers, to come out and receive this information about how to keep our children from going to prison. Even as young as 11 years old, our children can be charged as adults. And so we want to offer our children alternatives. We want the parents to be aware of the type of violations that our young children can be convicted of. You know, we've heard so much about these sexting, which on the last show, J. Tom Morgan talked about. And even children young as 11 can be tried as adults for sending illicit pictures of their friends to other people. And so we want to avoid that. So we have some great speakers that are going to come out. We have a speaker from Morehouse College, John Hobbs. We have Adolphus Graves, and we're hoping for Mr. J. Tom Morgan himself to be there. And so we look forward to a great event.
Oh, good. You know, you talked about the schools and keeping our kids out of prison. There is a term that's being used called school-to-prison pipeline. And I just want to read just a little bit to you and ask your opinion about this. It says, with most school reports showing that progress in the majority of metro schools venture well below national standards, while suspension and expulsion rates reach an all-time high. It has led some to draw a direct correlation between the decline of their schools and the rise in local prison populations. Known as the school-to-prison pipeline, it gives a face to a disturbing national trend that sees children funneled out of public school and into juvenile and criminal systems. Many of the youth involved possess learning disabilities or have suffered from abuse, neglect, or even extreme poverty. These characteristics comprise the profile of average juvenile offenders, and though some may commit minor offenses, zero-tolerance policies have ensured that the majority of them be punished with all of the ferocity that the law can offer. While some believe in school officials decide to aggravate the issue, choosing to hinder over help Metro Atlanta community leaders. Oh God, it's back to what we were saying about the community being responsible. You know, I can go on and on and on, but I'll stop right there with this school-to-prison pipeline and what you plan to do with your seminar and the work that you'll be doing here in Clayton County with the young people will address that.
Yes, we hope to address that, again, making the parents and the children aware of what they can do to avoid prison.
Okay,
we don't need any more young people going to prison.
No more, right?
No more.
Tell me this. Where is it going to be?
It's going to be at the Perry Center, located on Spring Street.
137
Spring Street in Jonesboro. It's an awesome building. Oh, I was there today to sign the contract for and it's a very nice facility. I think it'll be a great time.
Yeah. Let me just close out right here, Wayne. This event tomorrow was actually, how do I say it? It was the brainchild of the 20 Women Dialogue Group that we wanted to address the issue of our children in the justice system. But we realized that women cannot address male issues.
Right.
And therefore what we've done is we just did all the legwork, we put everything together, but the men, you guys have taken over, and this is your program, and you will be coming up with action items and going on with this particular initiative?
Yes.
Oh, very good. So tomorrow at 11 o'clock, the Perry Center, 137 Spring Street in Jonesboro, Georgia. Please show up, particularly you men, please show up. Someone was asking me, as a matter of fact, Sharon Kellum, who is a member of 20 Women Dialogue and who is also very, very instrumental in bringing all this together. I was telling someone that she pushed me real hard because she felt the need so much, and I'm glad of that, Sharon. If you're watching this evening, thank you very much, and the community, thank you very much as well. I want to make sure that we make people to understand that we have to solve the problems in our community. We cannot depend on anyone. We can't blame anyone. All that's over. It's now time for us to get busy and save our children. And so
it's up to us.
It's up to us. And so until next week, I say to you, Synamon says, what do you say? Good night. This is good.